Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
I have a chance to talk to Professor Wang Mingming, who I've known for 3 or 4 years now. How would you like me to call you?
Wang Mingming.
Wang Mingming, okay. So when and where were you born?
I was born in this city, the city of Quanzhou, in March 1962. Yeah.
1962.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're 46, is that?
I'm 46, more than that, a few months more.
Okay. Tell me something about your family, as far back as you like. As an anthropologist, you're probably interested in your ancestors.
Right, maybe not that far, but my father was kind of, he started in this city as an ordinary person, a worker.
What kind of work?
He began when he was very young in this city as somebody a young boy who made ice cream for the movie, the cinemas, and then the liberation in 1949 took place, and he had this opportunity to become what we call the border soldier, border defending soldier, one of those. But my grandmother was really angry at that because he was her only son. So she took him back from the army. And so my father,
Which border was this?
This is the coastal line.
The coastal border.
Yeah. So my father moved back to the city. And since then, he has worked in the government, right? As somebody like a civil servant. And my mother went to a nurse school in about 70 miles from here, kind of Republican area in that period. She went, and then she came to this city to work in the first hospital. So they met each other, and I'm kind of product of their love anyway. And I don't know how far I should trace back. Yeah?
Yes, trace
but my
back.
surname is Wang. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I look quite awkward to the Han Chinese because my nose is slightly bigger, and maybe my eyes are slightly deeper than ordinary Chinese. So supposedly I'm kind of mixture, and I have this impression that my mother's mother, her eyes look quite different from the Chinese. They are kind of brown eyes instead of dark eyes. And people here say that she is Persian.
Persian?
Yeah, she's kind of descendant of Persian person.
So there was a huge Persian presence here, wasn't there?
There was a huge Persian community in this area a long time ago, about in the Yuan dynasty, in the 13th century. The Persian were either merchants or soldiers, hired soldiers who employed by the Mongols to control this area on behalf of them, right? Because this area, the main inhabitants were the Han. And maybe I'm a mixture of that kind, but my surname is kind of different story. Yeah? Our genealogy says that our first ancestor was one of the 3 brothers who conquered Fujian in the so-called 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. When the 3 brothers from Henan, they were all in the same family. Yeah? They were Wang, like a king. And they established this Min state, separated from the other states when China was divided. Yeah. I don't know whether this genealogical story is correct, but people are proud that we are the descendant of this big regional state. But I don't know. This is different from the unified China perspective. Yeah. So the longer perspective of our family history is kind of also quite complicated. Yeah. And in my own experience, I'm just a child, a son of my mother and my father, who continue to work for this government. Yeah. This is what I can say.
On the Persian matter, was this ever discussed in your family? And was there any acknowledgement that maybe there was a Persian element?
No. My grandmother, my mother's mother, right? She often complained that her fellow villagers gave her a nickname like cat's eye. Yeah, she was called a cat's eye, but her village was not recognized by the government as a Hui Muslim community, so she never thought of herself as a Hui or Persian. Yeah. So we never, we have never been interested in this ethnic matter of our family, but I do feel that I look quite awkward to other fellow Chinese people. Yeah.
What did your mother ever talk about?
No, she's just a kind of post-revolutionary civil servant, a chief nurse in the hospital. So grateful to the new, new Chinese government. Yeah.
And did you have brothers or sisters?
I have two sisters, one living here, another living in the Philippines. Quite typical of people in this area, a family living, members of just one family living in different places or countries even.
Because this is a very famous area for migration.
Yes, emigration, yeah.
Why is that? Why? Because it's coastal and trading and rather poor and...
For my undergraduate degree, I wrote an article about this. Why this huge emigration? Why don't they just come back? I had this question. Yeah, they went out and do business and come back to China to just like treat here as their home. But they seem not. I did some calculation of demography. There was this quite huge decline of population in this area during the Ming and the Qing, like much fewer people here than before, right? So people must have been killed or just moved out, and according to a lot of local historical studies, they really moved out. Why did they move out? And this is the question that I have been trying to answer. I think that the imperial state didn't allow enough space for their commerce, which was so critical to their livelihood, because agriculture here was not so, not so possible. All the field was not enough, and then the sea. There's some saying like this. The Fujianese people treat the sea as the field, right? And so this commerce was not really like commerce. It's something about livelihood. And because the empire didn't have this, late imperial empire didn't have this policy of openness. So local people just didn't want to. They dare not come back. So long as they come back, they would have had difficulties of going out again. And there seemed no point for them to stay forever. Here agriculture is so difficult, and population was so large because of all the earlier migrations from North China to this place, to this coastal area. especially when North China was so chaotic, according to our histories. Yeah, when North China had the chaos,
Was this
so
during
the
the
Luan,
Min?
North certain Luan.
When they, from the Mongols and the Manchus coming in?
Even earlier on, like in the Jin dynasty, the Yongjia 之乱, the chaos of Yongjia period, Yongjia reign, right? A lot of people moved here, and then the mid-Tang chaos of Anshi 之乱. Those two chaos brought here a lot of population. But you know, my dissertation says, my under BA dissertation tried to argue that there was this heavy pressure on the land, so that pressed people to go out, and they could still come back. But here, you know, by the Ming dynasty, there was this policy of forbidding maritime trade.
Yeah.
This is
Your theory.
My theory, but I hope it explains certain part of my identity or my family, you know, family structure, if you like.
When you mention it, might explain a little of your identity and family structure. Do you see your work and your identity as mixed together? In other words, your work helps you to understand your own position and history.
I think my experience in this city has helped me think a lot about my studies, and inspired me a lot. But this came even clearly when I had more experience abroad, especially in England, studying anthropology. Because you know this is a city of mixtures, mixtures. If we want to say, you also emphasize that. When I went to London, I thought, you know, finally I realized that social anthropology in Britain or in Europe or in America, people just emphasize categories of things and peoples without paying too much attention to mixtures of things and peoples. And the mixtures of things and peoples in this place, you know, is something that is quite enlightening in my belief, for any anthropologist in the world. And so I'm especially interested in this topic. You know, how do we deal with mixtures? Of course, the structural anthropology has taught us a lot about, you know, mixtures in kinship, you know, to look at the mixtures of communities and groups, the kind of kinship work. But I don't think that's enough. You know, there are some historical mixtures, you know, some historical backgrounds of the mixtures, and there's some limit of them. The limits, you know, will influence people and induce certain reactions to the mixtures. So they can produce kind of nativist perspective or a kind of Puritan perspective in local society as reaction to mixtures. I'm hoping to think this out. I have written quite a lot, very sadly not in English, but mostly in Chinese, about how we deal with mixtures.
Thank you. Let's get back to your life. At what age did you first go to school?
I went to school at 7, to a primary school, not far from here, about kind of not more than 1 mile, which was called the East is Red School. And you know the phrase,
yes,
referred to Mao Zedong. And about 2 years after that, cultural revolution became quite violent. In the beginning, it was less so, just demonstrations, just slogans. So the school was kind of not working effectively, even though the teachers tried really hard to maintain the order. some older students in my school just, they could arrest the teachers and struggle against them in front of a big mass of us. And we were encouraged to throw stones on the teachers, towards them.
Did you do that?
To humiliate them.
Did you do that?
Yes, I remember that during one struggle meeting, I did throw one little piece of brick on the teachers. Yeah. But later, I found that my older brothers in the schools, older students, were those naughty boys. The naughty boys, they didn't do well, so they hated these teachers. And Mao, our Chairman Mao, seemed to provide a certain reason for them to get so angry at the teachers. Yeah. It's about, I went to the school in 1969. Yeah. But before that, in 1966, I went to the kindergarten. Also nearby, also very near, close to here. Right? When I was 1966, I was 4. I was quite big as a kindergarten student. But there was this big tension among the classmates, and my sister was kind of in another. My older sister was in another class. I was kind of feeling so lonely because everything was going somewhere, without order. Right? The second day, I just entered the kindergarten the first day with certain fear of strangeness. Yeah, I was not familiar with. I always live at home. I remember that the second day, a big boy in my class who was already 10. He studied in my class, like
10
years old, very big. I was 4, right? I was normal.
In the kindergarten.
Right. He was kind of full, but he was very big. The next day he was offered a red flag. And he held this red flag. And our teachers, we call them RE, the Andes, just organized us into teams. And we were led by this stupid boy, the big stupid boy, into the street, and we demonstrated against Mao Zedong's personal enemy, Liu Shaoqi, the president of PRC state. Yeah. And this is my vivid memory of the beginning of my school. Yeah. And then I continued to receive such education until the university. In the formal school education, I have received this kind of revolutionary education. Unfortunately, in our middle school, later I went to middle school, we had a lady teacher, musician teacher from Beijing. She was sent down in early 1970s to the mountainous area of Fujian, because in Beijing, as a student, music student, she accused, when she was drunk, she said something really bad about the wife of Mao Zedong. And so she was sent down to Fujian, and then in the mountainous areas, she performed what we call performance. Her political and productive performance was so good, so the government moved her to our school, our middle school, and as a very excellent music teacher, she attracted a lot of good students. So I joined her team, and I became a violin learner. I learned to play violin with her in quite a half secret way. We had to be trained in Western style, right? Not in Chinese Erhu style, but the really Western style. But the scriptures were not available. Yeah.
When you say scriptures, do you mean
The musical scripts,
yeah,
the scripts, you know,
yeah,
they
the
didn't
scores.
sell, they didn't sell. We had to copy, you know,
Hmm.
and this is a big influence on me. There were in that period certain people with, I believe, with great conscience
Hmm.
and with great ability to survive and leave some imprint, good imprint on us. I'm quite grateful to that specific music teacher who helped me to have my own opinion about the school, because ordinarily you have the school. The teachers were all good, very kind teachers, but you know the institution was kind of awful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Did you continue to play musical instruments, or?
I continued until when I was a graduate student in Xiamen University. Then I stopped. I went to London. I went to London without my violin, because I thought, you know, all these British people must be extremely good at this. I was nothing special. So I stopped, and I was very busy trying to read more Western books. During my university years, I spent so much time. I began as an archaeologist, but later I changed to anthropology. I needed to study a lot. Yeah.
So you didn't have time for music.
I didn't have time.
But do you listen to much music now? Does it mean a lot to you?
In Beijing, quite a lot. But I'm quite casual and informal person, so I don't usually bring some music here.
Is there any special music that you like above the rest? I mean, is it Western music or Chinese music or classical or jazz?
I'm sorry to say that I rarely listen to Chinese music, except those Chinese music which sound more Western. And this is quite stupid of me to have this prejudice. But after having studied with my music teacher in the middle school, I got this prejudice. I had this Western Occidentalism. And I thought that Western music was kind of perfect, like symphony, good, and that's good. But the Chinese music was so thin and slow, without any excitement. Yeah. I still have this unconscious habit of listening to Western music more than the Chinese music.
And are there any composers of Western music who you particularly like? Or periods?
I think in China, my teacher's generation, they all loved Beethoven and Tchaikovsky. And so we were not advised much to listen to like much British or French composers. We had a lot of maybe Finnish more than European. Those were the kind of big, more
Sibelius.
Oh yes, those big musicians. So if you ask me, I'm not an independent decision maker. I was educated by my teacher who loved that type of music.
Going back to your school, were you inside yourself? It's very puzzling to outsiders to imagine living through the Cultural Revolution and waving the little red book and throwing stones at your teachers and so on. Did you ever question any of this inside yourself, or did you think, well, this is just... In other words, was it fear and a crowd mentality, or was it genuine, spontaneous feeling that Mao was right and communism was right?
This complex of feelings. Sometimes, even now, I think Mao was partly correct, because the boys and girls, young children had more time to play. Nowadays, all of the children are kind of fixed in the schools. Everyday study, just degrees, grades and grades. Yeah. Something he was kind of right, but his ideas. I find that his ideas totally wrong near the end of Cultural Revolution. Yeah. Because there were so many stories about Deng Xiaoping. His successor. How great Deng Xiaoping was among the ordinary people, like legends. And so I had to, when I was already 14, right? I had to think which one was correct. And I had this big argument with my father, who was quite senior cadre, party secretary of a state-owned factory, sugar factory. I said to him that maybe capitalism was correct. Yeah. It's in 1976, and he was really angry at me. How can you betray? How can you say socialism is bad? Yeah. So there's this second element in the complex of feelings. Yeah. People try to have better life, try to avoid suffering. Yeah. And that made sense, sound quite sensible to me. Those legends of better life to be brought by Deng Xiaoping, by capitalism, was something quite good. This is kind of second element. And the third was that certain rituals of the school and the country in general turned out to be quite funny and ironic in the end. Right? The Cultural Revolution was something like festivals. So on the one hand, it was enjoyable, Students just can enjoy. Mao Zedong says, reading too many books, it's useless to read books, he said. And he prohibited us from studying English, right? So English was so difficult that we couldn't say Mandarin, yeah? We Hokkien speakers just spoke Hokkien. And the schools tried to teach us English. So we were quite grateful to him. It's kind of quite festive. And every day you have certain ritual activities, going to the street to shout, down with this and down with that. It's kind of liberation. But gradually, these rituals became quite funny, right? The teachers were so keen to, not keen, but they needed at least to organize us into something official, into teams, in the parades. But they themselves, they were very shy. They ashamed of wearing this red tie. They should wear, but they try to say, you should wear the red tie. But I think they should do the same. But they were always secretively taking the ties off. And then the Mandarin, they try to teach us Mandarin, the precise way of pronunciation. But their Mandarin was so awful. And once in Mao's funeral, my principal, the principal of my middle school, was kind of chairing this big school funeral for Mao, and his Mandarin was so funny, so I laughed. I was so heavily criticized by my teachers. It's so funny, this teacher, and I had to think that this is crazy. Yeah. So you have all these images of the 10 years of Cultural Revolution. I still think that this this is kind of very marvelous example for anthropologists. But for us, it's more complicated. Yeah, we have something positive about it, something negative about it. Again, it's some sort of mixture. And I cannot reject those who, in the West, call our generation a generation of ignorance. We haven't paid sufficient attention to our history. We are children of revolution. And I think we are responsible for a lot of disasters in this country. We are so ignorant of history, not only of Chinese history, but world history, because knowledge, when I was small, was called reactionary. Knowledge was nothing good when I was growing up. Right? Nowadays, knowledge is everything. Anyway, I'm a little bit, I'm very disorganized, sorry.
Not at all. Fascinating. Since we've been talking about Chairman Mao, more generally, not just as a school child, but looking back on the Mao period and Mao's revolution, how would you assess it? Do you think it was a disaster for China? Do you think on the one hand there were good things, on the other hand? Or how would you assess the experiment, looking back now?
Basically, I think it's a disaster, but it's kind of unacceptable. This is not correct. I say something wrong anyway. I find it a disaster. This is not good to say here in this country. Right?
Yes.
But I have this more sensible explanation of the disaster. I don't think Mao is responsible for everything. Right? Not either is the Communist Party. There is a long-term history that explains the disaster, maybe beginning in the mid-Qing dynasty, when the relationships between cultures, economies, and nations in this world became quite different from before. This integration, more contacts, and more contacts, but fewer consensus among different cultures was the main driving force of all later violent interactions, which contributed to the formation of Chinese modernism. Maybe in the mid-19th century already, but then the Chinese modernism was quite okay to me now, right? Because there was this more continuous approach instead of discontinuous approach. However, by 1895, Chinese thinking radically changed. Why? Because of China's defeat in the Sino-Japanese War. You can see the subtle difference. We were defeated by the Europeans in kind of early 19th century, mid-19th century, and we seem not to care too much about that, because why? You were different races. But the Japanese, they were our students. How could they, just defeat us? A lot of intellectuals just turn their attention to Japan. And then they find that Japan was successful because it absorbed all European culture. So we had to do the same, right? And this has changed the Chinese mind. For the that's already by the beginning, the dawn of the 20th century. So the 20th century has always this pursuit of modernity in a very radical way. Yeah. And Mao, I think, is just simply, if we want to assess him and his revolution, simply something in that continue. Yeah. But he is quite special. He's different also from other modernists in China. Yeah. His difference is that he's different from either Marx or Lenin. Yeah. Neither Marx or Lenin or trusting the farmers, the peasants, if you like. But Mao had this traditional Chinese tactic of, he had this great knowledge of strategies, traditional wisdom, right? And to win, to win, he thought one had to trust the peasants, and there were some people like the poor workers, right? So he stirred up this great revolution of the peasant trade, if you like, and that's very different from other branches of thought in Chinese modernism. And for example, Sun Yat-sen was a kind of more combining, kind of synthesizing both Marxism and sometimes other social theories. And Chiang Kai-shek was preferring to gain support from the national capital, right? National capitalists. As Mao Zedong and Fei Xiaotong, our great colleague, he placed a lot of emphasis on gentry class. Yeah. He said, in order to get the Chinese modernity, good modernity, one has to rely on the local elite, the gentry who knew how to write. But Mao was totally different. So you can say that this Cultural Revolution, if it's a disaster of one choice, one option, which was successful. Yeah. And the others were not, because it's an option derived from the consideration of majority. Yeah. And this is what I'm thinking. Why he made this, what we call we even call it the correct option in social science, because social science also emphasizes majority. I'm thinking whether it's the mistake of social science. I don't know, but this is what I think.
What about the Great Leap Forward?
That was again, it's kind of similar to what I say about the Cultural Revolution. His anxious desire to achieve this UN statistical standard level of livelihood was a very important part of the Great Leap Forward, because UN published this, what is the good life, right, for a nation. So he followed that, and he thought the interesting thing is that he always taught his followers to trust the masses, but he was very heroic, right? He thought his leadership could make China achieve this UN, goal of development. So his first slogan was to catch up with Britain. I think this part of the history of Great Leap Forward is extremely important, but it has been neglected by, existing studies. Yeah. One has to know that he was trying to modernize.
Mm.
Yeah, and we only talk about Deng Xiaoping as modernizer. But I think there's a long history of modernism that what happened.
Right, well, let's come back to your life. Were there any other subjects at school that, apart from music, which you really enjoyed and were beginning to get involved in?
I was kind of very quiet, and like now I'm kind of quite wild. I was always listening to the teachers, and they taught me what to do. I just did what they told me to do. I was quite interested. I'm not interested, but I was kind of that kind of boring boy, right? Not quite interested. And of course, I enjoy all the games. Yeah, enjoy all the boys' games.
Are you good at games?
It's quite good. Not good or bad. It's not important. Just enjoy playing with others. Some local games. Yeah. I was quite good in all classes except sports. Yeah. I hated it because you had to line up and do something together.
But I thought you said you quite liked games.
Those games were not classified as sports.
Oh, I see.
In my mind, the games are different. They are arts, right?
What were the games? What sort of games?
Like gimbal, yeah. Playing this packet
with
packet.
Cards.
The
Cards.
The wrapper of cigarettes. This is a great game during that time. The boys collect different types of
I see.
things, and then they were treated like a token, money, but symbolic money only. Yeah, and they were trying to accumulate. And there were so diverse games about it anyway.
So those are the games you mean, but you don't mean sports. You don't mean rugger and.
I don't mean that. Maybe I use a different category.
Yeah. Well, now I understand it. Were you doing any science by this time or not at school?
I was a quiet and kind of humble student. So I was selected by the secondary school into the very elite class of science. If I had gone on and refused to study music, then I would be in the Chinese University of Science and Technology. I was kind of number one in the class. I was very good at the mathematics, but very bad at the chemistry. So I quite like mathematics because the teachers of mathematics were always those eccentric guys, very extremely kind of funny, comic. Their classes are so interesting. They just treated this abstract, formulas as certain games, and they always behave in a very different way from other teachers. They had their style. I love those teachers, and they have this total freedom. When they speak about the formulas, they just forget anything, right? They are marvelous. Yeah, I was so interested in mathematics.
At the end of your school, your school was in this city, was it?
Yes, also nearby.
Yeah. Did you apply to go to several universities or just?
I spent 3 years trying to go to a music academy, right, or a department of music, without success, right? Because maybe my standard was not not good enough, and there's this transitional period in history when China began to reopen the university to everybody, not just to the good workers. Right. The intellectuals were liberated again. They were no longer criticized. And they had a lot of children and relatives to come into the music academies. So
What date is this? About
it's
19?
about between 1978 and 81.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the Deng Xiaoping.
yeah, the reform.
Yeah.
Yeah, began with certain in the fields of arts. They were more kind of compensation for the intellectuals, more freedom for them to choose which one you want, right? And because my father was kind of founder of a lot of factories in this city, right? So he didn't know this music people. So I didn't have this backdoorism. Backdoor, you know, that term is quite popular at the time. And I was not really a talent, right? So, without success. And then I was in 1981. I was feeling fed up with all these failures of trying to go to music academy. So I said I should try another thing. So I took the national exam in the humanities, and so in that year I was quite successful because you have this standard.
Yeah.
Which grade? And I went to archaeology in Xiamen University, in 1981.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I enjoy archaeology very much. My father wanted me to study management studies, and I refused. I went to archaeology because why? Archaeology, to do archaeology for me was to travel, to go to a remote site, right, and to dig up something. Yeah, and it's quite rich. Even now, archaeology, Chinese archaeology is very good. It has a lot of content, unlike social science, just kind of very empty. I was very interested in, how to just divide, to examine the items and give them some dates. Right? It's very technical thing. Yeah.
Was this? There's obviously been an enormously exciting and rich period in Chinese archaeology since then, particularly the discoveries at Shan and at Chengdu and elsewhere. Did it feel that you were living in a very exciting time with the terracotta warriors and so on?
Right. I didn't feel much. I just thought that I need so much study. Because in the bookstores, in the universities, there were so many books, new and old. And I was so ignorant, I was taught not to study, just study the textbook. It was, more than enough. Yeah. So I tried very hard to read more and more and more, and the books were so exciting. Yeah. They had new ideas. Even the European novels, I don't know much, but you had the opportunity to see them before they were forbidden, right? And that kind of blossom of 100 flowers was an exciting thing. I don't know whether Chinese archaeology discovered more, because actually there's no difference. Even under Mao, thanks to this great scholar, Guo Mo, he was an archaeologist, but Mao Zedong loved him. Right? So he had this opportunity to organize archaeology, and had a lot of discoveries even during the Cultural Revolution. And I think, in my impression, the only journal that continued to publish really academic articles was archaeology. Yeah, Chinese archaeology journal. But the journal always had this, in the front page, Mao's quotation. But behind you see something else, right? So in archaeology it's more difficult, but difficult to say that the post-reform period made a lot of discoveries. No, not that. But the general environment of reading and learning science was very exciting to everyone. Yeah.
Were there any particular archaeologists who you admired and influenced you, either at Xiamen or elsewhere in China or the world?
Right. I was influenced by those authors who I didn't have chance to meet. Yeah. For instance, Su Bingqi, the Beijing University archaeologist, was really, really good. Until now, very good, interesting. So I love reading his. And Zhou Hen, the also Beijing University professor of archaeology, he was very good at the bronze things. Yeah. And I was later year, kind of more advanced year, I had this chance to meet with Professor Tong En-zheng of Sichuan University. He moved to Michigan Museum in the 1980s, right? And K.C. Zhang, Zhang Guangzhi, and Yang Wenming, those great archaeologists. And I find them very exciting, their writings and their persons very interesting. But I had to study, I had to finish my degree. Yeah. So I followed this archaeologist, Zhuang Weiji. He's died long ago, right? Some years ago. He was the discoverer of the Song boat in Quanzhou port. I studied with him in the final year of my college, and he taught me a lot about Quanzhou, archaeology. I wrote this demography and archaeology article under his instruction. So I read a lot of his books, and became quite interested in the history of this city.
Which you went on to work on later.
Right.
Yeah. So you passed your final examinations,
Right.
and then what did you decide to do?
In the third year of my university, our section had been included by anthropology department, which was newly established in 1983. And because the section of archaeology was attached to Department of History before 1983, so I had been in the anthropology department, and then I took the, later, 1 year later after graduation, I took the graduate and postgraduate exam, and I got, quite high grade. And I became a student of anthropology. But that kind of anthropology was still totally different from what I'm doing now. It was called ethnohistory, the study of ethnic groups in ancient times in South China. My teacher was Chen Guoqiang, also the founder of Chinese Anthropological Society. He founded in 1981. He studied with Professor Lin Huixiang, who was in Academia Sinica before the liberation. He studied anthropology in the Philippines. It's very strange, but he was really kind of number one advocate of anthropology in China. Same generation as Professor Fei. But my teacher, Chen Guoqiang, studied with him. So I studied with Chen Guoqiang. And as a postgraduate student, I had the opportunity to join the movement of promoting anthropology in China. I began to do some translation with, not very smooth language, but, that was quite exciting to me. Just trying to do some work anyway. Yeah.
What were you translating?
I did some very basic, like textbook. it's my teacher's assignment. You do this textbook, something. And then I had a lot of opportunity to read more and more English books. Yeah.
Had you learnt English at school? Or
Actually, I really began to learn English in 1981. It's a necessary exam if I wanted to go to university. So I had to learn it. And then in a university, yes, I spent quite a lot of time learning it without being able to speak, just to read and write sentences.
And then that's when you started to translate.
I started to translate, yeah.
So that was for 1 year after university.
After university, you mean master's degree?
Yes.
That's for, normally in China it's a Soviet system. It's an unfair system of Soviet Union. It was kind of 3 years.
3 years.
But I finished 2 years, then I went to London in 1987.
Why did you decide to go to London?
There was this opportunity to go because our university received a document from the Ministry of Education saying that your university can select the 3 students to go with the Sino-British Friendship Scholarship to anywhere in Britain, right? So I took the exam and I was selected as one of the 3. Yeah, so I went with that scholarship.
Could you choose which university you would go to?
I would any university and any subject of study, I could choose. I could choose any. Yeah. I was quite, maybe people say I was quite stupid, because I could choose to study in Oxford or Cambridge. One of my classmates went to Oxford to study finance, and he's now become kind of top stock market advisor. Yeah. But I just stick to anthropology, and I find the Asian anthropology something sounding quite unique, and it was again maybe a wrong choice. Later I tried to go to Africa, but without success.
Tried to go to
Africa to study,
yes.
maybe from London, but I couldn't find. My professors told me that it's impossible to find money for the Chinese student to go to Africa. You just go home and study.
But I thought you said you went to study archaeology in London.
No,
originally.
Anthropology.
Anthropology.
Social anthropology.
From the beginning, it was going to be social anthropology.
Right. I chose anthropology.
And which college? Where did you go?
SOAS, Department of Anthropology at SOAS.
And what year was this? 1980.
In 1987.
87.
Yeah, in October.
What can you remember any of your feelings at arriving in another civilization and culture?
Yeah, I was really looking forward in the aeroplane to arrive, but after arrival I felt so sleepy. I never left China. The time was so different. And the first room I had was in the Chinese Ministry of Education's office in London. They had a kind of hostel there. I stayed there with other Chinese students and tried to watch TV. I couldn't understand at all because they spoke so quickly. Right? I could fall asleep just in 2 minutes. Yeah, because of also the time difference. And then the next morning, the first evening, I just sit there and just slept in the sitting room. Next morning, I tried to go into the city of London, because the Chinese office is in a suburb. I never took underground before. Before I London. And I discovered the weather in October was so cold compared to my hometown. And underground tickets of the underground transport was so expensive. It's like to travel from Xiamen to Beijing, you know. And you just travel from suburb to the center of the city. It costed so much.
Yes.
I felt so, you know, so bad about Britain in the beginning. Yeah. The difference of money, the value of money, and you know, difference of language, difference of the weather. Yeah, everything.
So you began to get a bit depressed.
Very depressed and homesick. I felt so homesick. I wanted to go home. You know, at least in Quanzhou, my mother and father could give me some money to spend, right? In London, just waiting for the Chinese government to send me money into my account. And I had to still to open certain kind of account in a bank. I had never been to a bank before in China. You just had a cash. Because bank in early reform China was not so popular. And very few, right? Only maybe officials and the parents went. I, as a young man, never thought of going to a bank. And that was so difficult for me. So you have to provide this and that and wait.
Were your fellow Chinese, the people you were with, were they also in the same state as you, miserable?
Some of them, those from Beijing and Shanghai were so excited, unlike me. I'm from this small town, Quanzhou, then was kind of 1/3 the size of today's Quanzhou. And but the Beijing people and Shanghai students, they were there and they were so good at the tube, right?
Yes.
I just follow them. Right? They were very excited and skillful in the city. So yes, there was a big difference. Yeah, they were open-minded. They talked to the British people. I even couldn't speak, even though my English was actually much better than theirs. Right?
How long was it before you went to the university? I mean, to register at the university?
I spent 1 month in an English school whose name I have forgotten, in northern London. Yeah.
For making your English better?
Just English tuition. Yeah. Together with Portuguese, Spanish, Italians.
You'd arrived in London and were just about to start at SOAS. Do you remember your first reactions when you went to the School of Oriental and African Studies?
I did try beforehand once to see where it was. And then on the day I just went. And the secretary, somebody, I don't remember her name, quite nice. She advised me to see Richard Tapper.
Yes.
Who was kind of in charge of postgraduate students. So I went to him, and then he asked me to see Lionel Kaplan, the chair there, and I went to see him. Then Lionel asked me what kind of books I have read. I said Louis Henry Morgan, and then Margaret Mead, Ruth Benedict, and soon he said, not enough, you go to a master degree program. Right? I was going to do PhD. Right? He said, no, you just follow 1 year master degree, MA, and that is good for you. Lionel was very insistent. I was in a hurry because I had a little kind of 3 years funding only. I wanted to finish within 3 years, and he insisted. He said, I will talk to the British Council, right? They must extend your stay here. So I began the MA period. I followed 2 terms. That's my beginning.
And who was your teacher?
Mainly, Richard Tapper was in charge of all of us. So he had a quite systematic course on contemporary social and anthropological theories or something like that. So I follow that, and then just like maybe in any department in the UK, I had to take kinship and ritual, economics, politics. Kinship was done by Stuart Thompson, taught by Stuart Thompson, because I took it later. And in my impression, there was very interesting teacher, Christina Torrey, who taught both ritual and politics. But she was only there just kind of informal, short-term lecturer. Right? And we had David Parkin's lectures. Yeah, David Parkin, Mark Hobart.
Yes.
They had a special series of lectures on contemporary trend in anthropology, and Paul Spencer was lecturing more about the classics, social theory. I found that Paul Spencer's lectures enormously fluent. He always just emerged with a piece of paper, just talk for 2 hours, just slept, right? and I couldn't quite catch up with David Parkin and Mark Hobart, who had all the, new ideas, complicated philosophies. But later, I gradually understood them. Understood more. Hobart was quite eccentric, so very enjoyable too. Somebody studied India, Richard Burkhardt.
Yes, Burkhardt.
He was very serious lecturer, very good, but more kind of formal. His lectures were always formal, and he organized a lot of discussions among students. Just divide the students and just discuss. My English was totally kind of not there. So
you didn't discuss much.
Right.
What were the main contrasts that you noticed between the way you were being taught it SOAS and how you'd been taught in Xiamen?
Right. Actually, the dramatic contrast was between our Chinese professors' repetitive lectures and British people's professors' more practical way of teaching. They try to make you read before you come to the class, and they try to make you speak. And this was very attractive to me. Even though I couldn't speak, I just sit there looking very stupid. But later I could, the second term I was quite good. I wrote essays. And I began to think about the good sides of Britain. Unlike before. I was so, having a lot of homesick. Gradually I became used to it. I think this is good. And in my class, it was so international. People from East London, Scotland, Wales, Bhutan, Egypt, Japan,
Have you remained in contact with any of them?
No, it's a pity, because during the fieldwork and writing up period, we went away, and some people came back after I graduated, for example, and some just remain in the field.
So you thought that it was a good teaching system?
It's a very good teaching system. I still believe now. I am trying to promote symposium in China, and this is kind of inspired by the first year in London. Right.
Did you have personal supervisions where you would write an essay and see one person and
Yes.
discuss it with them?
First year, I always went to Richard Tapper. Yeah, he was in charge of the essays.
Yes. And you used to spend time talking about your essay with him?
Yes, very little, because these you British professors are very busy. You always stand outside the door and talk just 1 second to the student. They say, I have no time, right? But Tapper chatted once or twice, longer time.
Well, with our MPhil students, we spend 1 hour
1 hour.
every 2 weeks.
Right.
And they come and we just talk to them for an hour.
Maybe because I was too stupid.
No, I think it's a different system in London. Cambridge is different. So you did 2 terms only, did you, for the MPhil?
2 terms. And then I was asked to pass the exams, final for MA, because I was not required to take MA degree. I just follow the class. And they wanted to see my examination essays. I wrote several, I don't remember, 3 or 6. Yeah. And I submitted to Dr. Tapper, and he read them and found them extremely interesting. He gave me quite high marks and passed me to Lionel Kaplan. To him, you decide, right?
And what did Lionel say?
Lionel said, okay, you now can do PhD, right?
That's good. And had you chosen the subject for your PhD by then?
No, I spent another year doing library research for my MPhil report, because one has to do MPhil first and PhD.
Yeah.
And then I spent long hours in SOAS library, which is very good, one of the best in the world, reading sinology, reading William Skinner, Maurice Friedman, those things, and checking which are relevant. But my interest was ritual and politics.
Why were you interested in ritual and politics? Because they're so important.
Yes, and later, because during the process I also got to know Stefan Fortran.
How did you get to know him?
In the first month, I went to SOAS, and he was there chairing a London China seminar, and I went because it's kind of about my country, and I just went to say hello, and he said because he knew SOAS people, right? He said, "Are you from Quanzhou? And what kind of great place to come from?" He said, because I think a lot of anthropologists were planning to come to Southeast China.
They were mainly working in Taiwan.
Yeah, originally they went to Taiwan, and they knew that that's not enough, so they wanted to come, and I'm from there. So he took me to a meal with Michael Palmer, Stuart Thompson, and several other students afterwards. So Stefan, since then, I met quite a few times with him, and also he influenced my thinking, especially his writing about religion and ritual in China. It's very interesting and debatable.
Debatable. Well, since we've mentioned him, and you've remained a close friend of his, colleague since that time, which is quite a long time. I get people to give little sort of portraits of interesting people they've met on their life's journey. Tell me how you think of Stefan as an anthropologist of China, or as a person, or both.
Of course, he's a good and he's a very warm person in my experience and impression. Yeah. And he is a very good anthropologist in China studies. He's very good, highly respected. And I have learned from him a lot respect for religion of the, if you like, the Chinese people, which was not there, absent before I have so many conversations with him. In China, you have this disregard for anything superstitious, whereas people like him were trying to, study Chinese culture, social organization by looking at religious activities, what we call the superstition, feudal superstition. I think that is very inspiring perspective. Yeah. And in this aspect, he has made very important contribution, not just to British anthropology, but I think also it will be quite important for Chinese anthropology. The Chinese anthropology, for instance, you mentioned Professor Fei Xiaotong. He had never studied religious life, only economic life, right? And what we can learn from a new generation anthropologists in the West, I think that this is one important aspect. Religious studies, not just the practical things. Yeah. And he's a very important bridge. Yeah.
And his Chinese is good?
His Chinese, this is quite...
Mandarin.
Mandarin is not good, I have to say. But according to our friends and himself, his Hokkien was perfectly fluent when he was in the field in Taiwan. So, yeah, he said he's very ashamed of his Chinese, his Mandarin. Yeah.
This is my Hokkien.
Yeah, not enough for field work. Right.
So you mainly did a library study, and the theme was
on festivals, annual festivals. Yeah.
And what did you find? What was the general argument?
I wrote a long report and then submitted. It was kind of approved. And then I wrote a shorter proposal to Central Fund of London University, and they gave me a grant. Not big money, but enough for me to stay here for 1 year. And my original plan was to go to Anhai Township, about 15 miles from this big city. It was small, to see the coexisting calendars of ritual in that small town. But the one whom I met with was kind of a Buddhist believer or expert. He tried to persuade me to just study Buddhism, a Buddhist temple in his town. And and he always tried to stop me from going to another temple, right? So I thought it's dangerous to stay here, just become his follower. I left Anhai and come to Quanzhou, and then I have had more freedom because I knew so many people here. My middle school teacher, Mr. Chen, became director of Bureau of Culture. So he appointed me as a kind of academic associate of his bureau, and then I had the freedom to read his archives and visit, the places I want to visit. Yeah.
So, what was the theme that?
I'm quite at once proud and ashamed of talking about it. It's about, as I said, coexisting calendars. How the calendars, national, regional, and neighborhood calendars of ritual, in some way reflect three senses of space and place coexisting also, right, in the city, right? And for me, the national calendar ritual was defined in terms of national holidays. But the regional calendar ritual was always changing because it's the local elite who made them, the calendars, regional calendars of art performances and things like that. And the third kind was more traditional. Each neighborhood had its own annual cycle of ritual, involving the households, including the officials' household, right? So I was looking at that kind of thing. And then you can say that national holidays, how national holidays were celebrated here. They are to do with, bound up with the work unit system, Danwei system. Right? If you go out of Danwei and the official so-called cultural arenas, they are not important. And then if you have certain regional elite who try to revitalize Quanzhou as a prosperous place by not only fitting on the official calendar but also absorbing traditional calendars of ritual. They're very innovative, but they're built on the knowledge of history of this area. And thirdly, they're very keen to invite, attract overseas Chinese and foreigners. This layer, and this is kind of a space and sense of central place in some way. Not national place, but central regional place. And then you have some examination of neighborhood territorial cult. It's another thing, different, to do with neighborhood, community, and rivalries between different communities, and what can be shared among the households. The local senses of the public. I was looking at this kind of contesting histories in one city. I think it's. I said it's. I'm ashamed of it because it's less culture. It's kind of more political, sociological analysis of ritual. I'm proud of it because. I mean, this kind of thing is still being discussed in anthropology anyway, right?
Were there any particular theories or theorists who you used as exemplars or models, or drew on heavily in your work? And it has a vaguely Durkheimian feeling about it, but or some of Geertz's work on city-states or theatre-states or whatever. Was there anyone?
I was kind of confused at the time, so confused. I read so many books and tried to absorb all of them in just one thesis, just like any student, and try to, not only Durkheim but also Pierre Bourdieu, Foucault, Giddens, for instance. If you look at the national space, then Giddens is very important. And not just anthropology. And my mistake now, I think, is that I neglected much of the history of anthropology in my thesis. Right? Just trying to be too fashionable. Right? And I even sounded like a Pierre Bourdieu in writing. It's quite stupid. I'm so ashamed of it.
Did you read Lewis Mumford?
Sorry?
Did you read Lewis Mumford?
Louis Mumford.
Mumford.
Mumford, no, sorry. By so far, not yet.
Well, you should, because he wrote a great book called The City in History, which is one of the great works on history of cities. And he was the person I mentioned who wrote on technology, the best book ever on technology.
That kind of book I should read.
Technics and Civilization. But his book on the city is very great too. He's American.
Is it a translator or Mao's book?
No.
No.
No. An American sociologist, cultural historian, technical historian, polymath. He wrote many books. But you succeeded, and you wrote a thesis, and then or at least you came back to England. Who was your supervisor for all this?
Then I changed in the beginning to David Parkin.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope to study with somebody who is more famous, right, and important. And David Parkin was really helpful. He read my first draft, which was very long. And he said to me, this is not anthropology, right? It's a long book. He said that this is encyclopedia of Quanzhou. And he said anthropology should be a case study, which didn't actually convince me. I was more kind of white, I thought Chinese anthropology in United States or in Britain had this shortcoming of just focusing on one village. Right? And David Parkin was trying to say, this is still you want to do because it's safer. You're getting a PhD, right? And he helped. And then I tried to figure out something else, right? With David Parkin, with his semantic anthropology model. I tried to change my mind into some expression of ontology, semantics of ontology, like Chinese conceptions of happiness. And he didn't like that. I don't think he liked that. And then I think he fed up. Yeah, fed up. He was fed up with me and talked to Lisa Claw and Stuart Thompson. Stuart Thompson had been helping me a lot because he studied China and was very friendly. He helped me so much, and I had began long time ago before I formally said that can Parkin teach me. Right? He was very helpful.
So you transferred to Elizabeth Kroll.
Elizabeth Kroll. First, I chose Parkin and Stuart Thompson, and then Lisa and Stuart Thompson. And there's some complications there between people, persons.
What was that? There was sort of complex relations between them.
I think there's something there that also slight influence on this change.
How did you get on with Elizabeth Kroll?
She was too busy. She always had all the projects. So, but when she spoke in our class, the M.Phil PhD class, she was very, very interesting because her teaching was very practical, like how to analyze, how to use data, how to write a dissertation, very specific issues. Because she was a good writer and a practical writer. But she was always too busy, so I actually didn't see her much.
So it was Stuart Thompson who read it.
Stuart Thompson always, so helpful, and he read so extensively about social theory, anthropology, and China studies. Very good.
And finally, you finished the thesis.
I finished in 1992.
So it took you 4 years?
By 1992, 4 years. But actually, I took the exam in January of 1993. So.
And who were your examiners?
Stefan and Crispini.
Ah, yes.
They too. So they were very positive. because I study both history and ethnography. Right?
And this has been turned into a book in Chinese?
No, it's never been published.
But are you thinking of publishing in English?
I have to rewrite it or just change a lot before I can publish, because I'm quite ashamed of the superficial kind of fashion of quoting this and that.
So you haven't any current plans to publish it in English? You might do someday.
Yes, I might do. It's a expression of memory of my life in London only. Nothing important actually. Yeah, I have written a Chinese book, History of Quanzhou. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, it's a Chinese book, and then completed a second book in English about Quanzhou, which will be published next year.
Ah, that's what I was thinking of.
But it's very historical.
It's very different from
very
your thesis.
Different. And now I'm quite different from then. I'm still thinking of the coexistence, but I want to have something like a replacement concept, like a mixture. Yeah.
One of the things that we've come across in the guide to the museum, and which is a sort of short history of Quanzhou, is a lot of quotations from Jacob d'Ancona. And I read Jacob d'Ancona with great excitement, and then was told that it was a fiction, that it had been shown that this manuscript was a forgery, and yet this museum takes him very seriously, and they claim that there is a lot of evidence that in fact he got a lot right, and he couldn't have known it from other sources than personal observation. What is your feeling about his book?
I have several points. I think I feel the same. It's quite exciting, and living in this area, you have this book earlier than Marco Polo. It's a good thing anyway. But I have several kind of more academic points. One is the first is that the translator, who has been heavily criticized by both Western and Chinese scholars, is David Selborne. He is an important political philosopher in Britain, in Oxford University. He does not need to fake this case of the City of Light. He has high salary, he has a good family, and he has written so many books, right? He does not need to do that. And second, a lot of criticisms are stemming from prejudices about the history of cultural contacts between Europe and China. People are more used to saying that only by the late being that Europeans and Chinese
came together.
But in my impression, it's totally wrong. Yeah. How can you explain the Nestorians, Franciscans, right? And this kind of impression doesn't even explain this city, right? Because as early as in the Yuan dynasty, there were at least 2 great Catholic cathedrals in this city. Right? And we have discovered in Italy the letters and journals of those missionaries. Right? So this is the some suspicion of this book derives from this shorter eye history of Sino-European contact. I think this must be very long history of the contact, Eurasia continent. And I don't think that I should say this book is totally a true story. Right? It couldn't be a totally true story, because even if this Angola person did travel to Quanzhou, when he wrote, he would use a lot of others' writings, other his contemporary writers' materials. So you can always discover in his book certain mistakes. For example, I'm not, with this point, 3 points, I'm not saying that the book is totally trustworthy. But from this debate, I see a lot of biases against history, existing in this world. And they are very fashionable. Just doubt this and that without, really thinking about it.
Because people have even questioned whether Marco Polo came to China, as you know.
Right. This is very good to question, because people in the city of Quanzhou just use Marco Polo as their trademark. Right? To question it, it's very challenging. But again, if you say that Marco Polo didn't see the Great Wall, then I question. I have a question for him or her, right? Was the Great Wall important in the Yuan dynasty? No, not at all. It's so trivial, right?
Well, a lot of is made in the Marco Polo debate about things he didn't mention,
Right.
like the Great Wall, like bound feet of women,
Right.
like tea.
Right.
But these things may be so uniform and accepted.
They were just live. And Marco Polo, according to himself, he was only playing with the kings. He didn't pay attention to this.
Yes. Okay, well, after SOAS, did you come back to China or did you stay in the UK?
I stayed with Stefan for some time, and then I went to Edinburgh. I was his field researcher for his project for kind of 2 years. I went to Edinburgh independently to do postdoctoral research, and then after that I had another joint project with Stefan. So I spent quite some time there, still in Britain.
How long were you in Edinburgh?
Edinburgh for 1 year. 1 year. Very interesting year, but I only got to know this professor Nicholas Tapp.
Yes.
He's a very friendly and very good scholar of Southeast Asia and southwestern China.
He worked in Nashi sort of area, didn't he?
Around the Hmong.
Hmong.
Yeah, Hmong. It's kind of translational.
You worked with him, did you? Or?
No, I talked to him a lot because he was a kind of new lecturer there and so kind. And his wife is Chinese. So we were just friendly. I worked more with Bonnie McDougall, the chair of East Asian Department. Then, right.
Did you like Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, excellent. I'm still missing it. It's kind of wonderful city in my mind. Kind of so
Not a city of light exactly, but
yes, it's wonderful. It's even more wonderful for me, a person from this city, small city. London is kind of
too
like
big.
Beijing.
And then you came back. What did you come back and do?
I came back and I spent 1 year in the Institute of Sociology and Anthropology with Professor Fi Xiaotong as postdoctoral fellow. And then I was appointed associate professor, and then within 2 years' time I was given full professor.
Is this at
I had written
Peking University?
Peking University. Yeah, I had written some books by 1997.
Tell me something about Fei. You knew him quite well, just at the end.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes. What were his strengths and his weaknesses?
His strength was his capability of communication. He talked with other scholars and took their points. This is not in a bad way, but he can, be just trying to discuss and find out the issues. And he was a good writer, right? He was the only anthropologist, I think, who expressed so well. And he was extremely practical. He had this traditional literati habit of doing both thinking and practice, knowing and practice. Right? That was his strength, I think.
He was a good politician as well. Was
Great politician. That's why, thinking and practicing politically, maybe. But that was also his, in my mind, his shortcoming, because he was not academic enough. His writings were half academic, half political, and this confusion made his writings less academic. But after having said that, I also said that this kind of lightweight writing is sometimes more effective than the pretentious academic writing. Right? So I have this confused view about him. Right? I'm just saying that I'm more determined to do what I think is a good anthropology. Yeah. And I think he had his own anthropology. I have now my view of good anthropology, which is at once related to his anthropology and quite different.
In what way different?
I'm a lot more historical. I'm a lot more historical, and I'm lot more inclined to ritual studies, cosmological studies, whereas he was only looking at the contemporary issues. Even though he wrote something about history, that's very small part. And he didn't actually, in his village in Jiangsu, Kaixuan, peasant life in China, village, he didn't do a good study of temples actually existing in that location. Maybe this sounds bad to people like yesterday evening we were discussing, because temples are a boring subject in Western anthropology, but still in China it's quite important, because several generations just neglected, destroyed their significance.
I've heard him criticized for his views on the ethnic minorities and how they should be modernized very quickly and absorbed into the Han state. Is that a fair criticism of him?
I think it's partly quite fair, because he's a modernizer. Professor Fei is a modernizer. But I think that what he had done was not totally modernist. So in some way understandable. He used, I think under him, a lot of intermediate systems remained tolerated in the new system. I refer to two layers, two intermediate layers. One is the gentry class, another is the local native chiefs in Western China. In his theory, then such intermediate layers have been tolerated. And if the critics of him would like to turn the whole issue into ethnic policy, not just nationality question, right? the disaster will be bigger. Would have been bigger. Yeah. Why? Because one has to think that before 1950s, a lot of ethnic minorities, they had their own kingdoms. And in Western ethnicity theory, this is not recognized, just ethnic groups. And Fei was very intelligent by putting things in proper words, in quote, right? So I think he has some contribution, but I'm not satisfied, with his theory, which has already obviously has some negative effect. The fast modernization theory and the pragmaticism of his anthropology prevent Chinese anthropology from becoming something even just slightly critical. Just slightly analytical, right? But I'm happy with Fei's early writings in the 1940s. Those stuff were critical and historical and had some spirit. Right?
Do you think his spirit was in any way bent, shall we say, rather than broken by his experience? Because wasn't he purged in the Cultural Revolution?
Right. Of course, yeah. His two important works in the 1940s are not allowed still today to be published just as monographs. Let's be included in a larger book, not to publish by themselves. And in the 50s, he suffered from this distrust of the authorities, and especially criticized, attacked, assaulted by his classmates who had already turned themselves into Marxist ethnologists. So he has been very cautious. He has been very cautious. I know your point here. But still, our generation needs something more. Not just to admit, but also to rethink, I think.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about as we draw to the end of the interview, which is, if you had to write a lecture called Rethinking Chinese Anthropology, rather like Edmund Leach's famous Rethinking Anthropology, have you any insights into how anthropology in China can now contribute to world anthropology?
Then the first chapter would be why Chinese anthropology is not Chinese. It's general. And the later chapters will explain it in several ways. And I think Chinese anthropology can contribute to the world's anthropology by, in the first step, looking at China, just like our ancestors. Professor Fei was a China expert, right? But we shouldn't say this is too unique. We should say that by looking at China, we are also looking at the human beings, looking at the whole world. And what's the difference of China? This should be explained in specific anthropological terms, not just that we are different, we are native, something like that. What's the difference of China? I think in anthropology, China is different. This is very interesting because no sinological anthropologist have high position in general anthropology so far. No. Even though some of them were really smart, Why? Because China is different from tribal societies, from either tribal societies or European civilizations. Then what is China? Yeah. This question we need to discuss. Yeah. What is China in anthropology? I think, like India, it's a kind of third type, no opposite type. From the Western perspective, China is a third type, just like India. But is China the same as India? No. Not the same, because caste system is, if caste system is India, then what's China? I'm thinking about bureaucracy, perhaps. A kind of civilizing bureaucracy, which was not only political, militant, but also symbolic and economic. And is this perspective useful for Western anthropology in general, right? Or the world anthropology? I think it is quite important. China is different from Europe and similar to it. And so, anthropology of China, I think if it wants to contribute to anthropology in general, it needs to be a kind of social or civilizational theory, to be a kind of theory like that, not just ethnography. I think ethnography is important, but to explain China's difference in an anthropological way, yeah, and to admit a similarity is quite important. And this kind of issue maybe sounded quite funny to you. I don't know.
Doesn't sound funny at all. I do it all the time.
You do it all the time.
Well, with Japan, my book on Japan.
Right. But did my ancestors in anthropology in China, did they do it?
Not really.
Not really.
Because if you look at Maurice Friedman, for instance, he just does sort of Western-style anthropology in China. In other words, kinship, politics, village studies, community studies. It's the same sort of thing. It might have been Indonesia, it might have been many parts of the world. There was nothing very specifically Chinese about it. And he didn't really try and grasp the whole of China. He looked at one part of China, and he wasn't trying to build up a theory of Chinese civilization as an alternative to Western civilization. This is what I was going to ask you, whether any of your ancestors have tried to do it.
I have looked at books since late Qing. I don't think they have. They're just translations. Yeah. Any ethnography is a translation of Western theory, Chinese reality. So what you just said, I think also was in line with my thinking of Chinese language as an academic language in social science and science. Yeah. And this is more difficult because Chinese language has been a business language. But for it to become academic language, it takes a long journey. Yeah. So we have to write better Chinese academic writings at the moment.
I've always been interested in the way in which other civilizations, whether it's India or Japan or others, produce great thinkers who seem to look at their own society as a civilization, and have the comparative knowledge to compare it to Western theory and Western civilization. And I found one person who could do this for Japan, which is Fukuzawa Yukichi. And there are arguably one or two in India, like Niraj Chowdhury and so on. I've never been able to find a Chinese author who gives me that same feeling. There are great novelists, there are great poets, and there are great travellers, but there seems no philosopher, internal philosopher, who has looked at his own civilization, tried to make a model of it, and compare it with other civilizations. And I was hoping you would be able to say there was someone I could look at, but
you need to wait for some long years. Anyway, we are trying, but our students still need to something to feed themselves. They need to study to get a good degree in order to find their jobs. So they are being very tactful about things. Maybe I have this professorship, I have the freedom to think, but I'm quite powerless. just trying, but maybe just waiting to see. And this is, I have to emphasize that what I'm trying to do is nothing separated from Western anthropology. It's part of anthropology. Either it's Western or Eastern. The important point is to have respect for each culture. Not only one's own culture. This may sound American to you, but I think it's quite important to rethink universalism and to be really universalist. One needs to rethink social science universalism.
I think that's a very nice point, perhaps to end on.